All right, everybody, let's unpause. Let's talk about the supply chain. Whoa! Let's not talk about swerving off the road. All right, what is the supply chain? The supply chain is the network of trade that connects all kinds of producers and manufacturers with their ultimate destination, the consumer, the person who uses the good that's been created. Supply chain will cover everything from the beginning to the end. Now, at the beginning, we have what are called your initial extraction goods, such as like grain that's going to be made into bread, uh, iron ore that's going to be made into steel that will then be made into a car. I said iron ore that'll be made into steel that will be made into a car. So iron ore is that initial extraction. Steel would be an intermediate good, something in between the initial and final, and the car is a final product. Now, right now, I'm hauling a bunch of trucks behind me. These are final goods I'm hauling, not intermediate or initial goods. And I got to get them from where they were coming from, Phoenix, Arizona, to where they were going to, Houston, Texas. Why am I hauling them? Because apparently there weren't buyers for them in Phoenix, but there were buyers in Houston, so that's where they're going to go, where the buyers are. But anyway, the supply chain is what knits all this together. And why do we need knitting together? Well, let's think of it this way. Not everybody lives right next to an iron ore supply or an iron mine that is also next to a steel mill that is also next to a car factory. Some of these places are far apart. And you kind of have to make a decision. Like, do you want to have your steel industry right next to the iron mine, or do you want it next to the car industry? There's, that question right there. If they're going to be far apart, which one do you put the intermediate industry next to? And you've got all kinds of questions about that. Like, how are we going to get the goods from one place to another? Now, it used to be everything had to travel on horse cart. And if it couldn't fit on a horse cart, if it was too heavy or whatever, you just get another horse cart and split the load, and hopefully that would work. But you could only carry loads of a certain size with horse carts, or if you're going to go the route of a really big engineering project and move something really massive with a lot of horsepower and all, you're building specialized conveyances. And anyway, it's the horses doing the work there. And around 1900 or so is where we started to see rail systems come into play. And the first rail systems were actually for horse-drawn carts. It's just that having a rail underneath them meant they could carry a heavier load. The wheel would move along better, and the metal rail would allow the load to not sink into the ground. It would help support the load better. But then we had steam engines come about. They had their horsepower that they were measured in, that they could do the work of multiple horses. And then steam engines gave way to internal combustion. And anyway, so now we've got rail, canals, we've got trucks, we've got ships that go across oceans, container ships as well. There's what they are. We've got airplane that can move things around. So lots of different things can move all around. Okay, so I've talked about intermodal transport in the first video I did with the trucks. But I'm not going to go into that again here because I want to talk about the supply chain. The fact that we have different modes of transport that connect different parts of the world together means that, well, we could mine for a mineral in one country and move it by rail and boat to another country where it gets processed into some intermediate good and then get shipped to another country for other things. Or in the case of computer parts, you can have the initial metals mined in country A, then shipped for one assembly process in country B, and then all those little individual parts for a computer get put onto a motherboard in country C, and then that gets shipped to another country, country D, for final assembly in a laptop or server or mobile phone or what have you. You can have multiple steps for these intermediate goods, and they can be happening in different countries because you've got different levels of expertise, people who know the business, who know how to set up a production line and get things going or what have you. They just know what they're doing and they get it done. And so you ship it there because you think that's going to be the best way to do it, either for purposes of quality or quantity, it's a cheaper price or a better good, whatever it is. That's what you do. Now, what happens to impact the supply chain? Well, you could have a COVID, a global pandemic, will certainly impact the supply chain. We had that happen when we had COVID-19. We had a supply chain impact because we couldn't move goods the way we used to, and that resulted in shortages. Now, some shortages were legitimate ones. Other ones were shortages because people panicked and bought a lot of toilet paper. You know who you are. You didn't need that much. Shame on you. And there are people who bought eggs, like they're an insane amount of eggs. There was no shortage. They just created one because they panicked. And then all the eggs went off, and then, come on, thanks a lot there. Anyhow, but then there were legitimate shortages. There were things that really couldn't get here because of the pandemic restrictions. And we had situations where workers were sick. They couldn't handle the traffic that was coming in, and it would back up at the ports to the point where I think California and other places had some port traffic stacked out, 15 miles, 30 miles offshore. It was significant. And it took a very long time for it to move through. And because of that, think of it this way. What if I'm building a car, and a car doesn't have just steel? A car has thousands of parts in it. And I've got all but one of the parts that I need to make the car. I don't make 99.99% of a car and then sell it and tell the customer, don't worry, the steering wheels are back ordered. We'll get one to you as soon as we can. No, we wait until the steering wheels are available, then put them in the car and then sell 100% of a car when we sell it. There are just there's a lot of goods like that. A game controller that I'm using here to drive my truck with. Nobody will buy 99% of a game controller and then be told, yeah, that A button, we're all out of A buttons, but we'll have them shipped to you as soon as we can. Just try to use the other buttons as much as you can. No, I need to use the A button because, it's a game controller. You sell 100% of one or not at all. Well, if one of those parts that's needed is not available because of a problem at the factory, a problem in the shipping process, then the entire assembly line gets backed up. And if the entire assembly line is backed up, you may not be able to make any more cars regardless of how many parts you have, simply because we're waiting for this one part so we can clear what's on the line, and then we'll be able to go on with the others. It's that's a problem there. That's a supply chain issue there. Another one would be in just distribution. If we're waiting for the finished good to show up, but it can't because of the port being blocked up, well, then we're not going to be able to get it to the consumer. That was the situation with cars. During the pandemic, there was a much reduced purchase of cars going on, and car manufacturers reduced their production lines. Some were having trouble getting from the factory to here, the USA or other places. Whoa, let's not crash. and so we had situations where once we did have higher demand for cars, because the ports were backed up, we were told, like this was the situation with the car we purchased last year. We were told, we were told by the company that we could get a car at a certain price, but that they could only provide the price. They couldn't tell us when the car would be available. And they told us also, if you're flexible on certain things, then as soon as that car becomes available, we'll be able to get it to you. So if you're willing to have, say, a slightly lower level of trim or a higher level of trim, or you're not picky about the color you have, all these things could be used to, figure it out. Well, we actually got the color we wanted and the trim level we wanted, so we were very happy for that. But, we could have gotten another car faster if we had been willing to move on a few other things. Just because that was what was in the supply chain. All right, but the final way that a supply chain can get really wrecked is if we reduce the amount of credit that's available. If there's a cash flow issue, and then you have a situation where the goods don't get delivered, not because they're sick or there's a delay or there's a problem at the factory. It's because they can't pay the crew and the crew refuses to sail, or they can't they can't hire the ship, so the ship doesn't sail. You can track these the supply chain potential issues by watching the Baltic Dry Index. It sounds like a horrible thing to have to track, but it's actually quite important. The Baltic Dry Index is a measure of how much traffic is going on in the Baltic Sea. The Baltic Sea has got a lot of movement of stuff, and Baltic Dry means these are dry goods. They could be either industrial or heavy-duty goods, things like that. Heavy-duty good would be like a major appliance, not a foodstuff, not something that is consumed quickly, but something that has a long shelf life, or a long lifespan. A washing machine, refrigerator, clothes dryer, vehicle. You get the idea there. Okay, so when the Baltic Dry Index starts doing weird things, like goes way down, then that means there's not a lot of demand for that shipping because people aren't able to put the shipments together, either because there's reduced demand and it just makes good business sense to not do it, or because the banks are freezing up in terms of credit. The banks are worried about lending money, and they're tightening their terms, and people can't afford to borrow money because interest rates went up. I mentioned this before, and I'll mention it many times. The interest rate is the price of money. Remember that. The interest rate is the price of money. So if interest rates go up, it's more difficult for firms to borrow, and they may not be able to secure loans, or the interest rates have gone up because the banks themselves are less willing to lend, and they've tightened up lending requirements. So people who used to qualify for loans may get in a situation where they no longer qualify. But when the Baltic Dry Index drops, that has been a very reliable leading indicator of potential financial troubles. Now, I'm not going to say collapse or catastrophe or panic. I'll say troubles, because lots of different things can be troubles. It doesn't all have to be a panic, a crash, or a horror. It could be just like a slow recession that's happening. That's not a horrible thing. It's bad, but unless you like recessions, then it's good. But anyway, the Baltic Dry Index going down is an indicator of supply chain issues. And if people aren't able to get letters of credit to pay for their shipments, then stuff doesn't get shipped, and assembly lines get broken down, and we're back at the place where we were with the pandemic. But now it's not because of a global disease that's affecting humans, it's because of a financial situation impacting banks, which was what was happening in 2007 and 2008. And the Baltic Dry Index was dropping precipitously prior to those situations. And we had a really horrible time. And it was a case, again, where because we had this global situation of what's going on here? Oh, road work ahead. Oh, great. Because we had this global situation of difficulty. Whoa. He shouldn't have done there. Oh, well. I should have let that guy over, but it looked like he was stalled there. Anyhow. Because we have this global supply network, we are depending on shipments of stuff from China to happen on time so we can get our... Whoa, that car came out of nowhere. You see, he just spawned right there. I'm not responsible for that. All right, we're going to keep going. Um, oh yeah, the global supply network. Yeah, there was a time where we couldn't have global networks like this for everything, and most of the manufacturing was done local to car makers and manufacturers and things like that, and whatnot and what forward. But we had, but now we have it where, whoa, oh, they're just going slower in front of me. Okay, well, let me just pull over then and get in this lane, and there we go. Okay, yeah, sorry, I had to adjust there. Uh, but yeah, we had as we really globalized our network, and because of internet ordering in the 1990s, we got what was called just-in-time delivery, or JIT. So the idea there is you build up a network that allows you to get parts delivered right when you need them, and that means you wouldn't have to keep a huge warehouse full of parts. You reduce your demand for warehouses. You reduce your overall cost. It shows up just in time. You use it. You put it into your assembly line, and then once you've got all that one box used up, another box shows up just in time. And with that, you could also look to the emergence of China as a manufacturer. China makes a lot of stuff, both primary and intermediate and final goods. I said both and listed three. That's kind of a biblical thing. You see that same pattern in there. Anyway, I digress. But yeah, so China got in there, and people who wanted to take advantage of Chinese prices and where the quality was equal to anything made anywhere else, it said, yeah, we will pay a lower price in China, then we'll add on the price of the transport, and if it's cheaper than buying local, then that's what we'll do. We'll buy it in China and pay the transit cost. And as long as transport costs remain low, that's a good idea. And as long as your just-in-time network remains reliable, that's also a good idea. But if your just-in-time network breaks down, then you've got no warehouse full of spares to carry on production with. You slow down, you break down, and if your production is itself I got to drop down to 55 here. If your production itself is for making intermediate goods, then if you can't make them, you're going to leave other producers where they can't make theirs. The whole thing breaks down. Oh, I got to pull over then. All right, hang on here. Yeah, I'll get behind this Myru truck here. All right. And so this is one reason why you can see people who are concerned about national defense want to get away from the reliance on foreign manufacture. What if there is a conflict between the United States and China, or heightened tensions, and China decides to interrupt delivery of a particular good or resource that is used in national defense infrastructure, like important electronic parts for the manufacture of jet aircraft. Do we want to be in a situation where a conflict with China would reduce our ability to prosecute that conflict? There's other concerns there. I'm not going to get into that. We just want to talk about the production, the supply chain aspect of that. And then you have a question like, okay, well, then we're not looking at a free market to determine how we supply our defense and government entities. We're looking at a protectionist arrangement. We're not worried about protecting domestic producers from foreign competition as much as we are to try to protect domestic vital good producers from potential interruption of a foreign supply chain. I am a proponent of that. I think it makes sense to keep certain things local, especially when you're looking at that local job and it's benefiting your own fellow countrymen. I like that. I'm not being nationalist about it. I'm just saying, I like it when U.S. jobs are going to U.S. people for make things made in the USA, used in the USA. It helps me. If I lived in England or Germany, I'd feel the same there about those particular countries. And I don't want it to be where we are worried about like, if we go to war, then we're going to have to find some other way of supplying our vital infrastructure than what we were using in the past. I'd like it to be where it is properly used. But to do that, again, there is some protectionism in there. There is a measure of making sure that the makers of those goods and services are paid appropriately, so that way they can stay in business and not have to worry about that foreign competition at a lower price. So we have to subsidize things. We have to guarantee contracts, or we have to, and we also have to find ways to make sure that we don't have somebody who's buying from China and then relabeling it and selling it locally at the guaranteed higher price and pocketing the difference. You gotta watch out for that as well. There's potential for fraud. It's not an easy solution to have there, but I think it's one that's worth looking into, because when we consider how the supply chain exists and operates, we have things that work wonderfully well until they don't. And when they stop working, we can be left flat-footed, unable to handle the situation that presents itself, and we wind up in a worse state than we would have been had we not been using that particular supply chain. And here I am participating in a supply chain network as I drive my truck. But I'm hauling from one part of America to the other, and these are trucks made in America, and I hope they were made with all American parts, but I can't guarantee that, especially with this crazy world in which we live. How much longer do I have to go? About 65 miles, a couple more minutes. You can hang with me. We've only been doing this for 22 minutes. This is a relatively short video given the other ones I've had that have gone on for like an hour. If I hit it at half an hour or less, we'll call it good here. We're driving in Houston right now, which is a big city, and it's got some crazy roads here, as you see all the spaghetti I'm driving on. But that's how they designed some road networks for cities out here in Texas. They didn't go with a grid. They just took spaghetti, threw it on the wall, and said, okay, see where that spaghetti that's stuck to the wall? Right, those are going to be the freeways. We do have that comes from a comedian named Matt Mitchell. If you're from the South in the USA, you may already know him and enjoy him. I recommend checking him out. He's funny if you like regional United States humor. If you don't, then I don't want to bore you with the details. But he's a clever wit there, a clever wit. And he's family friendly too. I really enjoy that. He's clean. A clean comedian. That's a hard thing to find nowadays. I tell you what. Back in my day, we had cable TV, and they were it was filth then too. So don't worry. Back in my day, they were just as dirty as they are now. No big deal. Yes. Where's my next exit coming up here? Yeah, so if you got any, you should probably like, comment, and subscribe if you're still here and you're hanging out with me as I just drive through Houston at night. It's late. It's getting dark outside for reals, too. It's what? Oh, wow, it's 1 a.m. in the game, and of course I have the need for sleep turned off, so I don't have to worry about that in this game, but I do have a need for sleep in my real life, and it's getting to be about, 9 o'clock almost? Yeah, he says as he almost drives off the road. Wah! Here we are, we're in Baytown. All right, let's slow down. Take these over to the Kenworth dealer down here. Exit 797, that's right. I have driven on 797 miles of Interstate 10 here in Texas. There's a sign just outside of El Paso that says or like right at the Texas border, it'll say El Paso, like 10 miles or 13 miles, and then Orange, Texas, which is all the way on the other side of Texas, is like 959 miles or something just outrageous like that, because it really is that long. And I love Texas. It is one of my favorite states to drive in, which kind of a good thing because I live here. We got really good roads here because we depend on them for commerce and whatnot and getting around. Yes, sir. You ask me what I like about Texas, it's going to take you all night for me to get through all that discussion. Look at here, 60 miles an hour, and it's not even a freeway. Well, it's about to be one, but it's not an interstate. Because you saw me doing 80 on the interstate there. All right. I'm still going on, and I'm about to have to do some really fancy driving here as I get to it's the Port of Houston Bayport Terminal. Oh, boy. This is a tricky road here. I've done this before. So we're going to end it here. Yeah, you can tell me when I tab out of that, the light changes there. Hope you've had a fun time. Hope you like, comment, and subscribe. Hope you enjoy my Victoria 3 videos and all that other stuff there. We've had some fun talking about economics and driving trucks, and I'm rambling on. I really should cut myself off. Maybe I'll cut myself off sooner than I did in the previous